Hi guys, in this particular video we're going to discuss about the Yojana magazine of the month of September 2018, and the theme of this particular magazine was employment and self-employment, and this is going to be relevant for our SEBI, RBI and NABARD examinations. So before proceeding forward, let us take a look at the key theme and the focus areas of this particular month's magazine. So if you look at the key theme, this is employment and self-employment. And if you look at the different focus areas that we are going to discuss in this particular video, then they are key facts and figures about employment scenario, challenges in employment creation, schemes and initiatives of the government, rural and urban livelihood development, self-employment and entrepreneurship, and fostering the MSME, that is micro, small and medium enterprises sector in India. So let's start our discussion with employment, the Indian perspective. Now, India has a huge proportion of the population in the working age group, which is 15 to 64 years, and around 51.5% of India's population is in this age group, as per a study of World Bank in 2016. So India has a very huge population in this group, and this high ratio of working to non-working age population, it places our country in a position to reap the benefits of demographic dividend. So this is a very important keyword here, which we must remember, and we can use it in different places, and we can also be asked a question about this. And according to official statistics, if you look at the proportion of persons in the labor force, then this is declined. So this is something which is challenging for India. So the proportion of persons in the labor force, it has declined from 43% in 2004-05 to 39.5% in 2011-12. And there was also a sharp drop in the female participation rate from 29% to 22%. So this unemployment problem is really challenging in India. And if you look at the cases or the reasons through which it emerges, then they are mainly the structural rigidities of our labor market. So our labor market has a very rigid structure, and we are going to discuss about this in the coming slide also. There is a scarcity of capital, there is scarcity of money and finance, and there is low level of skills of our labor force, which is a very major challenge. And most of our discussion is going to be focusing on skill development in the country. Now let's talk about the dimensions of the Indian labor market. So as per the estimates of the National Sample Survey, Employment and Unemployment Survey 2011-12, which was conducted, 49% of the India's population is engaged in primary sector. So primary sector, which is mostly agriculture, etc. India's population is 49% engaged in this one. Then comes the service sector, in which 27% is engaged, and then comes the industry sector, in which 24% is engaged. And the peculiar feature about India's workforce is that it is primarily rural. So primarily our workforce is in rural areas. It is informal. It is not in the formal sector. It is self-employed, and the female labor force participation is around 22% only. Now, credible employment data is the need of the hour. So we must have the proper employment data. If we have to formulate policies, we have to conclude something on the problem with regard to employment, and decide something on skill development. So if you look at the recent population growth rates of India, then around 10 to 12 million people, they are entering the job market every year. So we need accurate data with regard to this thing. Further, given the low female labor force participation, which is only around 27 to 30%, this is a very grave matter of concern. The total number of job seekers, the people who are looking for job per year, they comes to around 8 million. So a huge population of India is looking for jobs. They do not have work, so they must get the work, and we must have the proper data with regard to these numbers, so that we can work on proper policy measures to cater these sections. So India is a young and growing population. It requires massive job creation. So we have already seen that how India's population is growing, and the labor force is also entering the job market at a very rapid pace. So they are demanding good quality jobs to meet their aspirations. So the quality of the jobs and the remuneration packages they are demanding are very high, and they're not often not in sync or not in coordinations with the aspirations of the young job seekers. So the quality of the work and the money which they get from the work, they are not commensurate with the aspirations of these people. As per India's recent population growth rates, 10 to 12 million people they are going to enter the job market annually, and this is a very grave challenge. And the increase or decline in employment in India is further hit by the lack of credible data. So this is a challenge for the current Indian government. Now let's talk about the modes of data collection which have been employed previously and how they have become inefficient, or rather they have just stopped the working. So employment unemployment survey was conducted by NSSO, and this was last conducted for the fiscal year 2011-12. So you can yourself see that how this is more than 6 years old and we need fresh data to conclude on India's employment scenario. Further, annual labor survey which is conducted by the Labor Bureau, it was last conducted for 2015-16. So then again there is no credible data on employment for the last 3-4 years. So this again becomes a challenge. Further, Labor Bureau's most recent quarterly employment survey, it also does not reflect the job situation in the country in an adequate manner. So proper data, it remains a challenge. We have not got any regular survey which would provide us with adequate data with regard to these numbers. Now, considering this particular problem that there are huge data gaps, we formulated a task force, and this one was headed by former Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog, that is Mr. Arvind Panagria. So this was formed to review the scenario of employment data in India in 2017, and as per the recommendations of this particular task force, yearly survey on employment data it should be conducted, and this should be based on household surveys to gauge the employment scenario in the country. So you have to remember that this task force was constituted and this was chaired by none other than Arvind Panagria. Now the problem with regard to data collection is even grave or more serious for the unorganized sector. This is so because the unorganized sector comprises more than 80% of the labor force in India. So the new economy which is emerging in the India, it is more or less membership based employment. For example, the Ola Uber companies, they are coming up in India and they are setting up driver partners in the country, and there are different home service aggregators which are supplying you the different services through making the different service providers like plumbers, electricians, etc. as their partners. So this new form of employment has come up and we have not got any adequate data for this one. So these professionals, they are different from the formal employees which are working in the big corporate houses or the government companies. So they are not covered in any official or employment estimates. Further, if you look at the professionals who are working in the country, like chartered accountants are there, company secretaries are there, lawyers and other professionals, they are there. So they are also forming the part of workforce each year, and when they go for work, they also take their assistants along with them. So many people, they are hiring additional people as assistants and other service providers. So this people who are supporting them as additional people, they're not being accounted for in the workforce. So this again remains a data challenge. Next is self-employment. So if you look at the self-employed numbers, they have gone up very significantly over the last 4 years, and the primary reason for this is attributed as Mudra loans. So we are all aware about the Mudra scheme of the government, that these loans, they have helped the entrepreneurs towards self-employment and job creation across the country. So if you look at that disbursement scenario, over the last 3 years, around 12.27 crore loans have been dispersed under this Yojana. And a most important factor which we must remember is that 74% of the borrowers, they are women borrowers. So we can conclude that the past 4 years have seen employment generation and a demand for jobs has not lagged behind the supply of new entrants to the workforce. So in the past 4 years, new labor force has entered in the market and new jobs have also been created, but still, considering the fact that a huge number of people they are entering the workforce, this job creation, it would remain a challenge. So more work is required to be done in this direction. Now next is fixing India's 3 E's. Now what are those 3 E's? So these 3 E's, they are education, employability and employment. So first you gain education, then education makes you employable, and then you get the employment. So this 3 E's, they are very crucial part of raising our productivity and ending the poverty in the country. So everybody in the country should get proper education so that they become employable and they should get the proper employment. Now what is happening is that everyone is getting a job, but they're not getting the wages that they need. So they are employable, but they are not properly employable or fully suitable for the work. So that's why they're not getting the proper wages. So to do this problem right, we need to follow some steps. Like this problem requires raising productivity through formalization. So if we formalize the sector, we can target them, we can provide them the requisite skills, or we can give them incentives. Further, we should go for more and more urbanization, because the urban clusters, they are a rich hub of different sets of jobs which can come up in these scenarios. And then we can go for industrialization, because industrialization would create tremendous amount of jobs. And then is financialization, in which we can give money or credit to the people, like as we are doing in the Mudra scheme. And then is development of human capital. So we should impart people the requisite skills and knowledge to do the work. So to raise the India's productivity, we need to raise the formal employment to 50% of the labor force. We need to raise the number of cities with more than a million people. So we need to raise the urban cities to 200. We need to reduce the farm employment to less than 10% of the labor force, and we need to get an adequate balance of the cost, quantity and quality from our schools, skills and college system. So our schools, skills and college system, they should be not as costly, and they should have optimum number of teachers and optimum number of learners, and the quality of the learning or the quality of the skills which are imparted through them, they should also be of high quality. Now let's proceed to our next area of discussion, which is innovation and entrepreneurship as the keys to employment. So if we promote an innovative climate in the country, if we promote entrepreneurship through different schemes and policy measures, then they can help in employment generation and even self-employment generation in the country. So first, let's take a look at the challenges in employment creation. So India has the largest youth population in the world. So this is a challenge. Around 27% of the population of India is in the age group of 15 to 29 years. So they need to be provided jobs. And the challenge that further exists is that they do not have proper levels of education and skills with them. The dropout rates are high in our educational institutions, and people, they tend to discontinue the education. So these all factors, they are hampering the employability of the Indian youth. And if you look at the unemployment rates, then they are growing at a steady pace. So they are rising. Even with the increasing educational qualifications of the people, they're not getting the required jobs. And one of the main reasons for low employability of youth, as has been brought out in this month's Yojana magazine, is the preference by the majority of youth for general stream of education. So majority youth, they are doing general education. They are not going for technical or professional education. Only around 12.6% of the people, they are going for this technical and professional education, and only 2.4% they are pursuing the vocational education. So they should remember that general education is not going to do you much good as the technical or professional or vocational education is going to do. So one must focus on these aspects or streams of education as well. So what needs to be done? Now there is a need to increase the formal employment. As we have already discussed in one of the previous slides also, we need to focus on increasing the formal employment, because once we bring the people to the formal net, we can cover them under the different schemes, we can cover them under the different initiatives of the government, so that their skills can be enhanced and they can be made more employable. Further, the schools must evolve as a learning institutions where vocational skills should also be included in the school curriculum, and the emphasis should be on developing an interest in learning skills for employment. So schools should not merely impart the bookish knowledge, they should also create an interest in the minds of students that they acquire certain learning skills which could help them in future employment. Further, there is a need for incentivizing the fees for vocational and technical education, as most of these institutions, they are in the private sector, and the private sectors, they are charging a huge amount of fees, and that's why most of these institutions, they remain out of reach from the low income category. So government can provide certain sorts of incentives or scholarships to the people from the low income category that they get the required skills, and we are going to give you this much money, or we are going to give you cheaper loans, etc. Now let's take a look at the new emerging avenues for the Indian workforce. So the demographic potential we have just discussed, it can lead to increase in the GDP growth in the country, but we are not able to channelize it in proper direction. We are not able to convert it into productive workforce through proper skilling. So for this purpose, we have launched different policy initiatives, like there is Atal Innovation Mission. We are focusing on women entrepreneurship. We have launched Mudra scheme, Startup India and Stand Up India. So they are all impacting the availability of jobs. So they are all increasing the level of jobs in the country, and the livelihood opportunity for millions, they are growing, and the rural and the urban areas, even for the people who have low level of skills with these programs. Further, sectors like IT, telecom, banking, financial, healthcare, retail, tourism, hospitality, they are a great potential to generate employment. So we can focus on these particular areas. And further, this calls for an employment strategy which should focus on both manufacturing and services led growth. So we should not solely focus on services, we should focus on manufacturing as well. We should focus on formalization and industrialization as well, so that more and more people could get jobs in these formal industries. Next is, we need to emphasize skills over degrees. And for doing this particular thing, we need to follow a two-pronged approach. We need to teach those skills that are transferable across occupations. So whether you are a chartered accountant, or you are a doctor, or you are an engineer, you should have certain level of skills that should be transferable across occupations. And then there should be certain specific skills which are required by a particular industry. These are going to be separate skills for doctors and engineers. So we need to divide the skill set into two. One should be the basic skills which all the people should have, and one should be the specific skills demanded by that particular industry. And we can also adopt some systems which are being followed in the international schools. Like there is a school-based learning system which is combined with work-based learning. So this is being done in countries like Austria, Czech Republic, Denmark, Hungary, Netherlands, Slovak Republic, and Switzerland. So we can replicate these systems to the Indian scenario, in which work-based learning is also imparted. Further, different states have also taken initiatives to introduce vocational education at the level of secondary schools and colleges, and these initiatives, they have been taken by states such as Haryana, Himachal Pradesh and Kerala. So these initiatives, they can be encouraged further. Also, there is a need to align the national education policy with the national skill development policy. So the goal of the education should be skill development, and we should focus on aligning the vocational courses in schools with the national skills qualification framework. Now let's take a look at the sectors which have the potential to create maximum employment. So in this regard, services sector, which has adapted the digital technology, has a huge potential, and it has attracted a large pool of young labor force who are looking for job opportunities. And the different emerging areas like big data, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, cloud computing, virtual reality, blockchain, electric vehicles, they're all creating a huge set of demand for the labor force, and they require highly skilled and they are high paid jobs which can be there in the future as well. So we need to focus on developing skills in these particular areas, so that our population, our children, they are able to get jobs in these industries. And if we look at the poorly educated and the low skilled labor force, they have the opportunities in the apparel, textile and the leather sector, tourism, hospitality and the construction sector. So there are different sets of job opportunities for the people who have the requisite skills, who belong to the higher category of educated people, the skilled people, and for the people who are poorly educated and they have low levels of skills. Further, the government initiatives like Startup India, Mudra, Stand Up India, Swachh Bharat, they are also generating significant employment opportunities for the low skilled workforce. So using these particular initiatives, people can take loans, they can set up their own small ventures, or some other people can set up their ventures and they can give other people some employment in their ventures. So they are also promoting employment directly and indirectly. Next is fostering the spirit of entrepreneurship. Now, entrepreneurship is an important driver for creating employment opportunities. And if we promote more and more entrepreneurship in the country, then the entrepreneurs are going to themselves create more and more jobs. So this is important that we harness the demographic advantage that India is possessing, and we ensure that people have adequate level of livelihood opportunities despite their level of skills and education. And the government has initiated different initiatives in this direction since 2014, and an increasing number of tech-based startups, they're also emerging in the fields of e-commerce, financial services, and IT-enabled services, and they make India the third largest startup ecosystem in the world. So in a nutshell, we can say that government is fostering the spirit of entrepreneurship, and people are increasingly setting up their new startups in these emerging areas of e-commerce, of financial services, IT, etc. Now let's take a look at the some critical issues pertaining to the Indian labor scenario. So Indian labor laws, they are considered complex and restrictive. So the companies, they feel that labor laws, they are very complex and they are restrictive in the sense that they restrict them from employing more and more people, because the more and more people they employ, they have to comply with more and more labor laws. So compliance burden is something which is worrying for the companies, and as a result, the labor to capital ratio is low despite the fact that India has a huge amount of labor and capital is scarce in the country. So we are using more capital and less labor, but it should be the opposite. So these rigidities in the labor market, they have ensured that the employment elasticity of Indian economy has remained low. So what do we mean by this? This means that the GDP growth does not lead to commensurate employment generation without a focused approach. So even if we tend to grow the GDP, our employment levels, they are not going to grow at the adequate pace. Further, another challenges of disguised unemployment, especially in the farm sector. So this also needs to be tackled. Now let's take a look at the certain initiatives and interventions which have been made by the government in this regard, and we are going to discuss some more in the coming slides also. So government has introduced fixed term employment contracts so that certain employment incentive industries like textiles can assure certain fixed term contracts to the people. Also, the government is helping the employers in meeting their social security contributions in the form of helping them in making contribution towards employees provident fund and employees pension scheme, so that they do not feel that getting formalized is going to be a cumbersome or a compliance burden for them. Also, certain initiatives like Shram Suvidha portal, universal account number, and national career service portal, they have been introduced. Further, the steps like demonetization, GST, etc., they have led to a huge amount of our labor, informal sector labor force get into the formal sector. Next is the labor law reforms. Now, the reforms in the labor laws are an ongoing process, and we are all aware that how the government is trying to formulate a uniform labor code with regard to different fronts on the labor scenario. And the broad objectives of this labor law rationalization is to reduce the uncertainty and complexity in the labor legislation, to create a robust and comprehensive floor of rights which should be available for the employees. Further, we should modernize the dispute resolution, and we should focus on enforcing systems for good governance. Now let's also take a look at the certain miscellaneous schemes and initiatives of the government with regard to boosting employment generation in the country. So first is National Career Service Portal. So this portal has been initiated, and this portal has partnered with the Department of Post also to extend the registration of job seekers through the post offices. So the job seekers, they can get themselves registered on this particular portal, and the government has recently made it mandatory for the government vacancies that they should be posted on this particular portal. Further, model career centers are also being established, and the government has approved establishment of 100 such centers under the NCS project so that they can deliver quality employment services. Another is Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Protsahan Yojana, which we have just discussed on the previous slide, that how the government is helping the employers in meeting their social security contributions. Another is Shram Suvidha portal. So this portal has been formed to facilitate the businessman to get all the kinds of registrations and to submit all the returns with regard to different labor laws through a single online window. Further, e-biz platform has been formed, and this platform enables the businesses to comply with different rules, regulations, to get the necessary approvals, to fill in necessary forms, and to get the knowledge about different sets of business regulations in the country through this particular platform. And ESIC, that is Employees State Insurance Corporation, was the first organization to integrate its services like the registration of employers through this particular e-based portal of Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, which has been set up to promote the ease of doing business in the country. Next is e-Pehchan. So a process of establishing the identity of the insured person through his Aadhaar number has been set up through this e-Pehchan. So the Aadhaar numbers can be seeded to the insurance number so that the people, they can be identified easily. Universal account number, in which the workers and the employees, they have been allotted this universal account number, that even if they change their jobs, they will not be denied of the previous contribution towards the provident fund, etc. Also, the government has signed different bilateral social security agreements with 19 countries so that the interest of the Indian professionals and the skilled workers can be protected. And EPFO, that is Employees Provident Fund Organization, is the nodal implementing agency for this one. Now, for next is skills in online platform. So this is an online learning platform where skills can be learnt by choice. So with the introduction of this particular platform, the whole nation has potentially become a classroom so that you can easily go to this particular platform and acquire new skills. Now, another one is Solar Charkha mission. I believe you must have heard about this mission, and this is the mission of the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, that is MSME, and this mission is focusing on covering 50 clusters, and every cluster will give employment to around 400 to 2000 artisans. So this is going to be a huge number of people getting employment through this particular mission. Now, before concluding our discussion on this first part of our video, let us quickly also take a look at the most important ministry which is associated with the skill development and entrepreneurship in the country. And this also becomes important because this is a recent ministry and it has been formed only by the new government in 2014. So this is a dedicated ministry towards the skill development activities, and this was formed in November 2014. So this ministry has been formed to focus on enhancing the employability of the youth through the skill development. So here you can have a broad overview of the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. So the ministry has this National Skill Development Mission and the National Skill Development Fund and the National Skill Development Corporation, along with the National Skill Development Agencies. So all these agencies, they are broadly under this particular ministry, and it is coordinating the different skill development initiatives across the central ministries along with the state governments with their state skill development missions. Further, there are also certain partnerships with the private sector, industry bodies and the sector skill councils. So this ministry is working on the three different fronts. One is delivery. So delivery of skills is an important part. Then is systemic intervention. So it is intervening to correct the systemic deficiencies. Like it has its skills qualification framework so that we can set up a minimum standard of skills which has to be obtained or which should be there with the emerging labor force in the country. Next is financing. So it is also working on this financing front. So proper financing, if it is there, then it can automatically generate the employment and new skills can also be created. Now next is national policy for skill development and entrepreneurship. Now the vision of this particular policy is to create an ecosystem of empowerment by skilling on a large scale at a speed with high standards and to promote culture of innovation based entrepreneurship which can generate wealth and employment so as to ensure sustainable livelihoods for all citizens in the country. So we have to focus on skilling, we have to focus on high standards, we have to focus on innovation and entrepreneurship to generate employment and sustainable livelihoods for all citizens in the country. And this vision has to be accomplished by addressing the key obstacles like obstacles to skilling, obstacles to formal education, obstacles to training infrastructure and the availability of trainers, etc. By aligning that supply and demand for skills, by focusing on equity. So all should have the equal opportunity to get the required skills, and for this purpose the focus is on the socially and geographically marginalized and disadvantaged groups. Further, women are also one of the specific focus group of this policy, and the focus is also on connecting the entrepreneurs to the mentors, incubators and credit markets so that we can create or foster the innovation and entrepreneur culture in the country. So more and more entrepreneurs, if they come up, they can generate more and more jobs. And if you talk about developing the skills ecosystem, then we have already discussed how Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship is working in this regard. There is a National Skills Development Policy which was released in 2009, and the new policy we have just discussed on the previous slide. And the National Skills Development Corporation, it was established with a mandate to skill 150 million people by 2022. So this is a very important fact to remember. So further government recognized the need for a consistent policy direction and outlook on the skills, and the Skills India mission was launched in 2015. So Indian skilling ecosystem is complemented by formal financial services. So we are getting the people in the formal financial net through the JAM, Jandhan, Aadhaar and mobile connectivity. So by doing this, we can give them proper loans, we can support them in their own entrepreneurship efforts. And if you look at the Global Findex report, which was released by the World Bank, it reveals that the number of account holders, they have risen from 35% of adults in 2011 to 53% in 2014 and 80% in 2017. So there is a very great increase in the formal financial services penetration across the country. So guys, this is all about our discussion on the Yojana magazine of the month of September 2018. So this was the first part, and we'll continue our discussion in the second part. Thank you.